What? Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm Jack Frost, Chairperson of the Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you all to the committee meetings this morning, April 6, 2022. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at the M.U.D. headquarters building located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the M.U.D. website after the meeting's conclusion. Members of the public who may be attending today's proceedings may do so from an adjacent conference room. If any member of the public wishes to address the board, they will be escorted to the boardroom by the conference room moderator. Number one, safety briefing. I'd like to invite our Vice President of Safety and Security, Shane Hunter, to provide a briefing regarding protocol for all individuals in attendance at the board meeting today in the event of an emergency.
Good morning. Shane Hunter, Vice President of Safety and Security. The boardroom is located on the first floor here at M.U.D. headquarters, and the normal entrance and exit from this room is the door we all came in this morning. There's also an alternate exit here on this side of the room in case of emergency. It's on the other side of this door in the hallway that you'll find the nearest fire extinguisher, first aid kit, and the AED. With the location of the AED in mind, can I have a show of hands in the room who's CPR and AED trained? All right, thank you very much. Should there be a medical emergency, 911 will be contacted from security staff out front, and they will then escort medical staff into this space. It is severe weather season, so if we need to go to a severe weather shelter at any time during the meeting, that is also here in this hallway through this door. And if we need to evacuate this building for any reason, it's through this same door, two lefts, and we'll re-meet in the parking garage where we'll have an accountability and make sure everyone is safe. That concludes the safety briefing.
Yeah. Roll call.
McGowan.
Here.
Howard. Here. Kavanaugh.
Here.
Bagley.
Here.
Cook.
Here.
Friend.
Here.
Frost.
Here. Open Meetings Act. I would like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall in the back of the boardroom, and a copy is also available in the nearby conference room set aside for members of the public who may attend. Construction and Operation. Senior Vice President, Chief Operations Officer Gina Langle will review the capital expenditures.
Good morning. Gina Langle, Senior Vice President, Chief Operations Officer. Behind tab 6 is our capital expenditures letter. Of the 7 items on there, I will be covering 3 of those items found today. Under systems improvements, all the systems improvements for this month are relocations and will not be discussed in detail today, but you can tell from the map that they are in subdivisions 4 and 5. Under building plants and equipment, on page 2, item number 1, for $280,000, this is to cover the project of the 2022 network life refresh and upgrades. This request is in accordance with the network infrastructure replacement plan and will replace and upgrade a certain amount of network infrastructure each year in the district's computing environment. Included in the replacement of the aging devices are network switches, the Wi-Fi system, office phones, network modems, and other security appliances that are reaching the end of their life. This work will improve the security, the reliability, and the performance of the district's computing environment. Next up is item number 2 for $190,000. This is a website redesign. This project will redesign the district's website, making it more user-friendly, appealing, and simplified while following our brand guidelines. The last time the website was updated was in 2016. This is not for functionality such as payments. It's for the betterment of communication with our customers. It will expand communication services to include a newsroom, to post stories, photos, polls, infographics, to serve as a go-to source for our news media, customer, and our employees. The last item I will cover is item number 3 for $147,000 is the Skyline Zone 2 pump engine top end overhaul. This is on page 3. This request is for the material and labor to perform a top-end overhaul on the engine for pump number 6 at the Skyline Pumping Station. The pump was installed in 1993. It's recommended to be serviced when the engine's hours have gotten to 20,000. The engine is expected to reach this many hours by the end of this summer, and the work will be completed in the fall of 2022. The benefits of the overhaul include the prevention of an inopportune engine failure and improved efficiency and emissions. Are there any questions on any of these?
Gene, I have one. Back on item number 2 on the website, I didn't catch what you said about billing options. What did you say?
It will not cover billing options. It's a communication upgrade that we're doing for the website. We have, I believe you might have gotten a letter this week that talked about this Friday that we will be expanding some of our abilities for payments starting this Friday, but this particular project is only for the communications.
So the new billing options, how do they enroll? Not through the website? They have to call customer service or what?
I don't have a whole lot of information on that.
Director
Let me
McGowan,
see if,
Mark
Ms.
Doolittle.
Mueller, do you have information on that?
This expenditure is for the communication side of the website. The billing options are going to be how they always were. Stephanie can speak to them, but we're just trying to say this expenditure is not that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Stephanie Mueller, Vice President Corporate Communications. So thank you for the question. Yes. So customers today, when they want to pay online, they're signing up through our My Account. That's not going to change at this time. We're hoping in the future to make some enhancements to that. But this current redesign is just, as Gina was referring to, for communication and enhanced customer experience.
So customers can log on. They'll be able to watch these meetings live through the website and
So,
this?
well, so they can currently view on our live stream today. That's not going to change.
Change, okay. That's not affecting that at all?
No, it is
Okay.
not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
As long as you're
Yes.
there, I was looking at contracts or bids, and I don't see anything in there unless I missed it for this. Who's the contractor? How did we arrive at the amount for this cost?
The selection is Wave. That's a local contractor that will be helping us with this integration. There were 3 bids for that. They were the lowest bid. As to why it's not on the bid letter,
I may have missed it.
entirely
I didn't see it when I looked through there really quickly.
I'm not sure why it's not on the bid letter.
But I can speak on that.
Oh, okay.
The reason why it's not on the bid letter, according to our policies and procedures, the dollar value, and it's a professional service. So it was within that.
But it was bid.
Yes.
It was an RFP. We handled it as an RFI, and then we went into an RFP. They did an extensive review, and yes.
Okay.
So
I've got some other questions, but we'll talk later.
So I just would like to repeat what Ms. Meisinger said. That the dollar amount for that makes it not to have to come on here, and it is a professional service. So just to make sure that we have that in the recording. Any other questions?
I just want to understand that our updates for the communication part will be compatible and an easy segue to our updates for payment and that customer service side.
So for this particular part is the communications, but as part of the communications, the layout is important to be able to get to the payments. But to be clear, the payment portion of it, that's a different application and it's done separately. But that, yes, that would be taken into consideration as they're getting in there.
Right.
Understood. Thank you, Director
Thank
Cook.
you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Director of Plant Engineering, Stephanie Hand, acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates.
Good morning. There we go. Stephanie Hand, Director of Plant Engineering. I will be addressing the finals letter this morning behind tab number 7. We have 6 finals this month, 2 water development projects, 3 plant capital projects, and 1 service contract. Items A, B, and E have smaller change orders associated with them, so approving these finals will also approve those small change orders. I'd like to talk about item C just for a minute or two. This was a capital project at our Platte South Water Treatment Plant. This was a complete replacement of all the valves and actuators for the whole filter plant. An actuator is just the way you control the valve of how you open and close it. This required a total plant shutdown, so the whole plant was out of service from November through February. And I just wanted to give a little bit of kudos to some of our staff, both the plant staff, my plant engineering staff, the district maintenance staff, anybody I've forgotten, not on purpose, and our dedicated contractor. This project went back in service 2 months ahead of schedule. And so after having our plant out of service, it went back in service very, very quickly. And just real quickly, I wanted to show you a before and after picture up on the board. On the left side is your before, and on the right side is your after. And I put some letters on there just so you can kind of see how the two correlate to each other. The A, you can see the old valve over on the left side. A on the right side is the new valve. So you can see those are, I'm going to use the word, I'm going to use quotes, shinier, but that's not the reason we did it. It does actually look a whole lot newer on the right side, but we didn't do it for new paint and to make it shiny. We did it to put in new valves and actuators where now the plant can control the filter plant a whole lot better. And if you look down at D, down in the bottom left corner, first on the left, it's kind of hard to see, but over on the right, you'll see some new water quality equipment. Thanks, Jay. That's new water quality equipment where Mike Koenig's folks can now, they have better access to those, to that equipment. They can take readings a whole lot easier and can control the plant a whole lot better. So it was a very successful project, and it was just pretty cool. I'd also like to talk about item D just for a minute. This was a Roto-Rooter service contract for cross-border inspections. And I'm bringing this to your attention because the actual work was significantly less than the original contract. It was approximately half, and this was mainly due to delays during the pandemic. If you remember, our folks were not getting into homes to work on meters or anything like that. We took the same approach with our contractors and did not have them get into homes, and so then that delayed some of the work. And with that, I'd be glad to take any questions you might have.
Will we be having another contract with Roto-Rooter to continue our cross-border work?
We will. We're not continuing with Roto-Rooter. We took bids here earlier this year, and Backland Plumbing is now doing that work for us.
All right, but it's continuing.
It is absolutely continuing and will continue forever.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Director of Procurement, Sherry Meisinger, will now review the bids on materials and contracts.
Good morning. Sherry Meisinger, Director of Procurement. Bids and material contracts may be found on tab 8. There are a few items I will discuss this morning, and the first may be found on page 2. We are recommending the rejection of a single bid received from Building Crafts for the rehab of Basin 6 at the Florence Water Treatment Plant. We only received one bid, and the bid exceeded the engineer's estimate of $1 million. This project will be combined with another project at Florence to make it more competitive with the current bid market. The next two items I'd like to talk about also are we accepted bids for 4 heavy-duty rubber tire 4x4 loader backhoes, in which Murphy Tractor was the lowest bid and met specifications. These machines will be replacements for the units that have reached a point wherein they are no longer reliable or economical to maintain within the district's fleet, and will be sold at auction to recoup the dollars, or at least the value. The district currently owns 18 of these size loader backhoes, 4 of which are between 10 and 12 years old and are at 75,000 hours. The estimated lifespan is 8,000 hours, according to our transportation division. We received also a quote for 2 small directional boring machines with mixing systems, tandem axle trailers, and locating systems from Ditch Witch. The district chose to request a bid only from Ditch Witch of Omaha due to the numerous problems they've had on the past equipment that they received from the Vermeer product line. The quote from Ditch Witch presents 5% increase over the 2021 quote. So we bid these in 2021, and this is just a 5% increase this year, which is good with the supply chain and what's going on right now with all of our materials and stuff. So the district currently owns and operates 7 Ditch Witch directional boring machines, identical to the machines being recommended. These machines have proven to be very reliable. And we also have common parts and fluids on hand, so they're specialized machines. And then my last item I was going to discuss, Gina already did and provided quite a bit of detail, was the overhaul on the engine and Zone 2 and Pump 6 at Skyline. So if you have any questions. As far as the website redesign that we were commenting on earlier, the communications department and IT went through an RFI, and then they did an RFP, and they had quite a few contractors participate in that, and they did an extensive, it was several months review for that project. So, and purchasing handled the process through their Procureware software. So, yep. Any other questions?
Just out of curiosity, what's wrong with the Vermeer one?
Yes, so they said that the transportation department and construction, the equipment, the manufacturer, and the previous dealer, they did not get good response from them. Andy Melville could possibly speak on, and Andy's in the other room. He could speak on the conflicts and the issues that they had with them. They couldn't get parts to repair them. Okay. The response time from the dealer took longer. Mm-hmm. And so you know how that is with construction. You have to get a good turnaround time so we can get back out there and serve our customers.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Yes. No, good question. Good question. Thank you. Nothing else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
4, Director of Facilities Management, John Veloretsky, will now review the proposal to adopt design, build, and construction management at risk contract delivery system options for district control construction projects.
Thank you. Good morning. John Veloretsky, Director of Facilities Management. This morning, I will be discussing design and construction delivery systems and the adoption of a resolution for design, build, and construction manager at-risk processes for the renovation of the existing construction center and the construction of the second construction center to be located along Highway 133 and State Street. This resolution can be found behind the board letter in the board books under tab 9. Currently, the district utilizes a design, bid, build, delivery system for construction projects. This process involves the project owner contracting design services under one contract, then bidding the construction services under a separate contract. The Political Subdivisions Construction Alternatives Act was amended this session to allow the district to take advantage of 2 additional processes to complete projects. The first process is referred to as a design, build, delivery system in which an owner, through a single contract, hires a designer and contract team working as a single entity to complete a construction project. The second process is referred to as a construction manager at-risk delivery system in which the owner contracts with the designer and a construction manager during the design phase to develop the design team. The construction manager also assumes the contractual responsibility to deliver the construction project within the contracted price to the district. The benefits for the construction manager at-risk delivery system include allowing the construction manager to provide solutions during the design process to decrease costs, allowing for accelerated schedules for project completion, providing a guaranteed maximum price for completion, and the ability to manage all aspects of construction. Since the district is now included in the Political Subdivisions Construction Alternatives Act, the design, build, and construction manager at-risk delivery systems can be utilized for various construction projects upon an adoption by the Board of Directors. The construction manager at-risk system has been successfully used by industry peers to control costs and accelerate construction schedules for facilities projects. This includes organizations such as the Lincoln Electric System, the cities of Papillion and Lincoln, the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and Omaha, and Metropolitan Community College, among others. Members from Facilities Management and Plant Engineering had the opportunity to tour 2 of these recently completed maintenance facilities at Lincoln Electric System and the City of Papillion, and to discuss the benefits of the construction manager at-risk process with staff at each facility. The process was highly recommended by both organizations and will allow the district the best opportunity to complete both construction center projects within the approved budget and on an expedited schedule. Management therefore requests the Board of Directors adopt the attached resolution selecting the construction manager at-risk delivery system for the renovation of the construction center and for the construction of the second construction center. The resolution was drafted pursuant to Nebraska Revised Statute 13-2904, which requires the affirmative vote of at least 2/3 of this body. Management will also ensure its policies conform with Nebraska Revised Statute 13-2904 and that all other requirements of the act are met. I will be happy to answer any questions you have regarding this resolution and the construction manager at-risk process.
I have 2 questions.
Please.
If we approve this and you get a contractor, they have to deliver the product at the price. They're at risk for that price.
Thank you for the question, Director McGowan. So the benefit of this process is the guaranteed maximum price component. And what will be required is when we get the approved budget number, all parties will have to sit down at the table during the design process and work within that defined budget amount. One of the other benefits is it will help to control change orders at the end of the contract. We'll be able to make decisions while we're designing the projects to actually make those decisions to keep us from going over that maximum amount.
There won't be any change orders after we approve that project.
There could potentially be change orders, but it will be because of issues that might not have been foreseen by all parties during that process. But the benefit is that those change orders shouldn't be what you would normally see during a typical design bid.
So the change orders would be a change in design or scope that wasn't part of the original bid?
That is correct.
Okay. And will that project, once it's determined what that bid is and we pick the contractor to do it, will that be brought to the board again?
That is correct. We will actually be going through a whole request for qualifications and request for proposal process for both the design consultant and the construction manager, and both of those will be brought to the board for approval.
Okay, and then my next question is, you're going to use that for the construction center and the new construction center. Will you also bring to the board anytime you use this process for any other project?
That is my understanding, and I believe Mr. Mendenhall might be able to back me up on this a little better, but I believe the requirement to the statute is that we have to do that each time.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Director McGowan. Mark Mendenhall, Senior Vice President, General Counsel. The way I read this statute, the Nebraska Alternative Constructions, the Political Subdivision Construction Alternatives Act, is best practice would be to bring a recommendation to adopt a resolution authorizing the use of either design, build, or construction management at risk for each project that we decide to utilize it for.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions?
I don't have a question about it, but Mark and Tim, Jack, this is the process we talked about a dozen years ago-ish, when there were talks of building an alternate construction center on the property that now has the new tower that was moved, the cell phone tower where OPPD's. This is exactly what we talked about for those reasons. It wasn't codified, I don't think, in statute, but this is a better process than design, bid, build in terms of controlling prices and accountability is what I recall Tom Wertz telling us at the time we talked about this. Tim, was that a dozen years ago?
At least.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, just a quick question. Was the district originally omitted from the bill we were amended into it? Is that how?
Yeah, Director Bagley. So yeah, the way the bill reads now, you would think, well, we're a political subdivision. What is the issue with us utilizing one of these processes? But the Act has a specific definition of a political subdivision: city, village, county, natural resource district, school district, community college, or state college. So a metropolitan utilities district is not included. Thank you to the work of Mr. Kubat back there, and I believe Senator Wisher from down in Lincoln. We were able to amend this to include a metropolitan utilities district. That bill has been signed by Governor Ricketts, and so yes, that's why we're now included in this.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Rick.
Director Friend, good comments. We didn't use this process when we built Platte West, and what we thought that was going to be and what it ended up being in terms of cost was quite different. And you're absolutely right. I remember that. I'd like to take the moment to thank the board for your support. We talked about this a long time ago, and we will end up with not only a new second construction center, but a fully optimized 2 construction centers, so we can do what we need to do to get into the future, whether it's with our own crews or otherwise, but at least we will have the choice. So regardless of how we build it, which I think this is a great process, and I'm glad we were amended in, thanks for the support on moving forward with this. It's been a long time coming. Really excited to see this come to fruition.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Services and Extensions, Vice President of Engineering and Construction, Corey O'Brien, Main Extension.
Good morning. Corey O'Brien, Vice President of Engineering and Construction. Behind tab 10 this morning, we have our main extension letter. We have 1 water main extension and 1 gas main extension. The impact of our water main extension is 1 multi-residence lot and 5 commercial lots. The gas main extension, the impact is 52 single residence lots. If you look at the map on page 1, you'll see that the gas main extension is in subdivision 2. The water main extension is in subdivision 6. Briefly, on page 2, the water main extension for Maverick Landing does involve about $12,000 of district funds. We have an obsolete hydrant very near the project, and we're going to take advantage of the construction to replace that obsolete hydrant and a 6-inch valve. I would also note that the developer for Maverick Landing has requested M.U.D gas. The gas main project for Deer Creek Highlands Northeast is very straightforward, and I have no additional comments on that one. So with that, I would be glad to answer any questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Personnel, Vice President of Human Resources, Bonnie Savine, wage and/or salary increases and ratifications.
Good morning. Bonnie Savine, Vice President of Human Resources. I will start with a recap of employee counts for the last 2 years. On March 31st of 21, we had 810 regular full-time employees, 4 regular part-time employees, for a total of 814. To end this March, we had 824 regular full-time employees and 3 regular part-time, for a total of 827. We did have 7 temporary part-time employees as well, and we are ramping up for our summer program, and we do still have that application process open, so we'll be welcoming students in the coming month. A review of jobs actively in various stages of the job placement process is as follows. We have 7 jobs that have a requisition currently routing through the approval process. We have 12 jobs that are currently posted. 5 are internal only, 5 are external only, and 2 are internal and external together. And so you can see some of those external jobs on the website right now. There are also 4 summer jobs posted, as I mentioned. 10 jobs are in the application review or interview stages, and 5 have selected candidates that equal 5 individuals, and those folks are going through the hiring process at this time. Behind tab 12, you will see the wage and/or salary increases and ratifications letter. Human Resources is recommending the Board of Directors approve wage or salary increases for 14 employees this month. We have 5 OAC employees that are promoted through the normal posting process. We also have 5 OAC employees that are being promoted through the natural progression process within their job family. We have 4 SPA jobs that have selected candidates. 3 of those were OAC employees that are promoted into these SPA jobs, and 1 is a current SPA employee. And we also had 4 ratifications for hires during the month of February. We had a safety specialist and 2 engineers, as well as a basis administrator in the IT department. Are there any questions on the letter behind tab 12? Hello,
Just a
Director.
quick one. I think
Yes.
it was last year we hired a water construction crew to beef up our infrastructure work. Is that fully staffed? Are we doing any more for adding any other additional crews for infrastructure this year?
That crew is fully staffed, yes. That occurred last summer, in the middle of the summer. I will see if Vice President O'Brien perhaps has a response on this year's plans.
Thanks for the question, Director McGowan. So we're coming up to our annual budget process, and we always have that discussion as we go into those planning meetings. We are currently limited space-wise from CC1 perspective, so that's always an aspect that we have to consider. So we're now that we have somewhat of a timeline for when we're going to have CC1 renovated and CC2, then that will factor into what we do. At this point, as Bonnie said, the second water infrastructure crew is fully staffed and functional, and we haven't made any decisions yet about what we might put into the budget request for 23. Okay?
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Judicial and Legislative Governmental Relations Attorney Rick Kubat will review the 3rd legislative report for 2022.
Good morning, Rick Kubat, Government Relations. On tab 12 is the legislative report. As the report states, there's 6 business days left in this legislative session, and thankfully they're set to adjourn on April 20th. I'm going to start off on page 3, which is LB 344. This bill had a unique process. The bill was substantively changed to be an amendment that was adopted on the floor, and due to that, they pulled it back in the middle of the session for a committee hearing. Before they did that, they advanced the bill to select file. There were several providers, including M.U.D, that voiced opposition to that bill. It currently sits on select file, and we are working with others to have our concerns addressed. Most notably, what this bill really does is it allows the State Fire Marshal's Office, who currently conducts investigations of one-call violations, in the Attorney General's office is the enforcement mechanism. This would move away from the Attorney General's office over to the State Fire Marshal's office, where the State Fire Marshal's office would not only do the investigation, but that they would appoint a hearing officer, appeals of which would be done under the Administrative Procedures Act. One of a few of the district's main concerns is due process issues. You essentially have the State Fire Marshal's office wearing many hats, not only doing the investigation, but then hiring the hearing officer to make a determination of whether or not the State Fire Marshal's initial findings were reasonable. So as that bill exists right now, there's limited time in the session. I had a discussion with the speaker yesterday about whether or not that bill will be placed back on the agenda. Wasn't able to really get a clear answer, but if it is, we're working with organizations similarly situated to ourselves to get amendments filed on it so that hopefully it would take some time, because time is a precious commodity in Lincoln right now. So moving on from LB 344, I'm going to go to page 5, specifically LB 809. That is an important bill to the district by Senator Moser. It is on final reading, and for district purposes, it does primarily two things. It increases the amount of loan forgiveness under the state of Nebraska's state revolving fund, which is where the state is receiving the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act dollars. Those funds could potentially be used for lead service line replacement. So when you essentially have to apply to the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy for a loan, under current law, you can have up to 50% of that loan forgiveness. LB 809 would allow up to 75% of that loan to be forgiven. It also further clarifies that larger communities that serve a population of over 10,000, such as the Metropolitan Utilities District, will have access to the funds that are flowing into the bucket of monies available for lead service line replacements. Again, that bill's on final reading, and my expectations are that it'll be passed and signed into law.
Rick, will you let us know the results of that, how it comes out?
For sure.
Thank you.
Definitely. The next one right underneath that, I won't belabor it. Mr. Veloratsky spoke to it earlier. This is the bill that Senator Wisher introduced at the request of the district, and it enables the district to use design, build, and construction manager at risk. And Mr. Mendenhall also spoke to it. When those types of projects are deemed to be worthwhile for the district, they need to be submitted to this board for your approval, where 2/3 of you would need to make a finding that it's the appropriate route to go. And fortunately, we're done with that one because, as was mentioned earlier, it was signed into law. Then the next one I'd like to briefly discuss is LB 1023 by Senator Hilgers. That's the bill that would provide funding to 3 parts of the state: Lake McConaughey, Knox County with Niobrara State Park, and Lewis and Clark. For purposes of the district, this is also the bill that speaks to funding for the potential project on the Lower Platte Lake. We are not included in LB 1023, but in working with the City of Lincoln and others, and working with the Speaker of the Legislature and Senator McDonald, who initially came up with this concept, M.U.D. and the City of Lincoln are included in one of the state's general fund appropriations bills. I believe it's LB 1011, where $20 million is set aside for various studies for that lake project. And included in that $20 million were a piece of it, because there's specific language that the money is to be allocated to the Department of Natural Resources, and they are to consult with the City of Lincoln and the Metropolitan Utilities District in engaging in independent study to make sure that such a project does not in any way, shape, or form conflict with the district and the City of Lincoln's purpose of providing the public water supply, both in terms of water quality, water quantity, and anything really related to the public water supply. So in short, in a different bill, there's $20 million set aside, and of that $20 million, the Department of Natural Resources is supposed to use a portion of that to make sure that we have an adequate study of the project.
Hey, Rick, does anybody know what the timeline is for that study to be completed?
I don't know. I would imagine as soon as the session's over that they're going to convene a committee and that those studies are going to happen sooner rather than later. Certainly at the end of the session, one of the first things I think we're going to probably do is grab our colleagues at the City of Lincoln and sit down with the Department of Natural Resources to find out what they're thinking about in terms of a timeline. The next bill listed is the one that we had discussed previously, LB 1046 by Senator Bosselman. That was the bill that would allow the governor to appoint directors of NPPD and OPPD, five of 9 board members. That bill still remains in committee, and with the clock running, it's almost assuredly dead.
I thought about this bill when Prime Minister of Pakistan dissolved the parliament or something this week. I don't know. It seemed a little bit related. I don't know why.
I think Senator Bosman's more concerned about FERS or...
Exactly.
Sorry.
The last item I would like to mention on page 9 is LB 1196 by Senator McDonald. That was the district's attempt to request American Rescue Plan dollars for our lead service line project. That bill is essentially dead. It remains in committee. The city of Omaha, and both North and South Omaha, received a significant amount of American Rescue Plan dollars through Senator Wayne's LB 1024, and the district has been engaged in dialogue with Senators Wayne, Vargas, and McDonald about our lead service line project. They're familiar with it, and that those funds flowing to North and South Omaha, at least a portion of it, will go through a legislative committee, and they're aware that we're going to be seeking ARPA funds for our lead service line project, and we will continue to work on that going forward.
My understanding of that bill, the bipartisan one, is that 40% is supposed to go for the impacted communities that we find in the older parts of town. So I know that was a big number, but I don't know if it's, I hope we can get all the way to 40%. That's all I have to say. Since that's the intent and that's what it says in the bill.
That's a big part of that bill, is that monies are to flow into disadvantaged communities as defined by census tracts. And one of the things that the district will be looking at is overlaying where our known lead service lines are, which are really primarily east of 72nd Street, and overlaying them into those disadvantaged communities. Any questions?
Are you looking forward to the end?
This year more than ever. And it's
I
gonna
understand completely.
it's gonna happen. April 20th will be here soon.
The same way last year.
Yeah. Well, there have been some highlights, though, that some laughable moments.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. Insurance and Pensions, Senior Vice President, Chief Financial Officer Joseph Schaffert will review the Actuarial Valuation Report on the retirement plan.
Good morning. Joe Schaffert. I serve as the district's Chief Financial Officer. So as Board Chair Frost indicated, I'll be speaking to the information behind tab 13 that relates to the pension plan. So really there are 3 relevant documents, 2 of which are behind the tab 13, and the first and lengthiest is the evaluation report itself, followed by a summary presentation. Actually, I think the summary presentation's in front of the evaluation report that Ms. Beckham will speak with momentarily. That'll call out the highlights of that document. So the first document, the evaluation report, very comprehensive, 48 pages in length. Pages 1 through 11 are a really good executive summary. But in my mind, there are 2 key highlights or takeaways. The first of which is, what is the actuarial determined contribution required to fund the pension plan? And per this report, the number is just shy of $8.6 million. As a point of reference, 2021's required contribution was about $9.5 million, so about a $900,000 drop. A couple of drivers to the drop, the first and most significant being the investment experience that we had in the pension plan. I think as the board is aware, the plan earned significantly higher than we assumed in the pension investment policy statement. We earned at 13.7% versus an assumed return that was at 6.9, which has subsequently been dropped to 6.75. And then the other contributor is the percentage of wages that our employees contribute has been going up since the last contract was adopted with the represented portion of our workforce, and the remaining employees go along with that. So in 2022, 8.5% of covered payroll will be contributed to pension by employees. That is up from 8% in 2021. And then it'll reach its final increment to 9% in 2023, which this existing contract ends March 31 of 2023. It's important to note that the budget assumed an employer contribution of $12 million, so substantially higher than the required. And when we do the budget, of course, you don't have the luxury of knowing what the return's going to be on the pension plan. You're doing this in the fourth quarter typically. And I think, as we all know, you can, up until December 31, you don't really ever know where the market ends up. So that is a reason why the budget's significantly higher. We did, in fact, incorporate the additional contribution by employees, so that was known and incorporated. But because of the significant spread, management is recommending that we lower our contribution to $10.5 million, which is still 22% higher than what the actuaries indicate that we have to contribute pursuant to the funding plan of the pension. And it should be noted the district has contributed at least at 100% of requirements since, I believe, it's 2009. We've been doing it to try to chip away at the unfunded liability, which is very important. The other reason we still think it makes sense to contribute more than the actuaries have determined is it serves as a bit of a hedge against unknowns that could occur in 2022. And then in terms of that $1.5 million savings versus budget, that's split between the gas and the water departments because both contribute. So on the water side, we're still working on determining what we would do with this. An obvious candidate is to continue to fund main infrastructure, risk mitigation, whether it be replacement or assessment. And on the gas side, again, not determined, but with the number of building projects that are underway in the form of CC1 repair and renovation and CC2 construction, there are a lot of facility dollars that were assumed to be bonded, so we can chip away at some of this, perhaps some of the design costs. So again, the contribution in 2021, again, just to kind of, I guess, reinforce that we had been contributing higher consistently. We contributed $11.6 million to the pension in 2021, which was also 22% higher than required.
Joe, can I, I hope this is the right time to bring this up, but the $1.5 million that we're talking about, right. This board's already approved the budget at the higher amount, right?
You did.
So it's in the budget. What I would like to suggest to my fellow board members for consideration is, instead of having that $1.5 million go back to general funds like you said, why don't we contribute that to the OPEB and start building up and chipping away at the unfunded liability in our OPEB?
Well, the OPEB, I mean, interesting point. The OPEB, since we're not paying anything from the trust, we do pay-as-you-go for claims, and then we contribute to the trust. We're at over 50% funding, and we began in 2016, so we're making significant progress. And I think it comes down to maybe the highest priority, and it's a question, right? We believe the other things are more pressing and that we have a plan in place relative to OPEB if we continue to contribute at least what the actuaries are telling us we need to. So that's the reason why I believe the fund should be devoted elsewhere, but it's a board decision ultimately.
And I understand that and everything, but we already, like I said, we already approved that and earmarked it for the pension. And now that we've had great results, and we ought to all be proud of the 97%. Right. You know, wasn't that long ago, we were in the 83%, I remember. And we started chipping away, and we're committed to building that up.
Yes.
And we got to build up. Now we have the OPEB, and it's not totally funded.
Right.
And I'm just saying, this is an opportunity to use those funds to chip away at that and get it there. I know we have a plan. We had a plan with the pension too, but we, just being diligent and sticking to it. And this is an opportunity to throw a little bit more at it.
Right. The thought, I guess, in terms of what I was describing as potential uses is doing our best to kind of rein in. I mean, rate increases are going to be required on a consistent basis to fund the water infrastructure, and I'm trying to do everything I can to mitigate that. So, but again, obviously there's cash flow related to OPEB as well, which is paid for by our rates. So,
Joe, Mark Doyle, President. Good discussion, Director McGowan. We've had a lot of discussion about this, and I think a lot of good, positive things have led to the point where we're talking about just a planned contribution number. We strongly believe that the better option would be this year, and this year only, because we'll reassess in subsequent years, to move that to the general fund. There's so much rate pressure on infrastructure replacement that the lower risk, we think, to the ratepayers is to use this. Most likely, we're talking infrastructure replacement. We didn't do as much in the budget as we wanted to, if you'll recall. We shifted some of that effort to assessment, which I think is a good move.
Right.
But Director Kavanaugh asked me a few minutes ago about the main break on 72nd Street. That was a large main break, unplanned. By the way, that street is open now, recently. Is that right? Thank you. That main break, unplanned main break, don't quote me, but that's heading toward about $500,000, the kind of pavement that it took. This problem is, I mean, we're getting our arms around it. We're going to turn that curve. I don't know when, but we firmly believe the better use for that money is exactly as Joe said. Now, that's just my strong recommendation. I brought up OPEB just like you did. I really did. Privately to Joe, saying, why wouldn't we move it? For our employees and for our ratepayers, we believe that the better use for that, I'm not going to call it extra because we didn't contribute. This is a discussion we have every year. And we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we've contributed consistently over 25%, maybe 28%.
22% excess if we go at the lower level this year.
With the lower
yes.
level. So
Yes.
we're continuing to contribute at, at least 25% more, other than this year if we back it off a little bit. But it's a great discussion.
Does this require board action, or is it placed on file?
The contribution level, I believe, requires board action. I could, yes.
This month's meeting?
Pardon me?
At the meeting this month, today?
I don't think so. I suppose we could lay it over. I mean, we're contributing at some level just to spread it out, and then we adjust the contribution, excuse me, to ultimately what the board approves.
I just didn't see a resolution. That's why maybe I didn't read it correctly. It says in here, the last line, placed on file. That's why I wasn't quite sure.
I guess that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a
Well, and I've got the motion to make that, and in the motion itself, it states placed on file, so that would be the answer.
The documents. They're not, I think it says place the documents on file, the reports from everybody. Those go on file, but this resolution, does it require, like Tim says, the 8.5 or the 1.5 million? Does that require approval?
My belief is it does, unless council would disagree. Yeah, perhaps should we have split it between on file for the document and a resolution for the contribution? Perhaps, I don't know.
We can bring that back.
Shouldn't we have a resolution?
Yeah, good. Again, good morning, Mark Mendenhall, General Counsel. I think that the best approach would be certainly the documentation from Ms. Beckham and any other supporting documentation placed on file, but the ultimate decision, if we're going to change from what was approved in the budget, I think that would be and we can handle it just by really a motion, ultimately. I mean, I don't have a resolution drafted that the board would adopt. I think a resolution adopted by the board is essentially synonymous to, for the purposes of this, a motion approved by the majority of the board. So if you were so inclined, I would suggest a motion pursuant to Mr. Schaffer's recommendations.
Sure. I need a little bit more time, so I'd be inclined to, and also in the interest of the public potentially weighing in, I need a little bit more time to figure out, because
Yeah, I think that's
I
okay.
can't remember which piles of money are called what, and if they're already dedicated to flooding 72nd Street or fixing that, then I need some time.
And I don't want to lose sight of the fact this is a really good news discussion, so I'm
Yeah,
glad
well,
we're having it.
It
It's
is a good news,
fantastic
it is a good
discussion.
news discussion, and Mark, I have to admit, you make a, very good case, you and Joe, about rolling it into general funds, and I want to think about that, but we also have a plan in place, and a budget that we put in place for water infrastructure. We're going to do some bonding, we have an infrastructure surcharge, and we have funds coming in to fund those things. So we have that all built in and planned for. Now, this is a good news thing. Like you said, okay, we've got some excess funds. What do we do with it? And OPEB is an alternative, and rolling it in is another alternative. And I guess I'm kind of on the fence post on that.
And funding the pension as planned is another alternative for you. I mean, you know how we feel, but there's no wrong answer here.
Any other board members?
There's a right
Well,
answer.
I have a comment for Joe. Joe, I appreciate your diligence with this and your common sense approach. I mean, personally, I have learned so much from you, and I very much appreciate that. I totally agree with you. We have a responsibility to the infrastructure. Obviously, that's kind of a 101 with M.U.D. to provide safe, clean, reliable infrastructure. We also have an obligation to the ratepayer. So if we have money that we're putting into the infrastructure and we have the opportunity to not increase our rates, I think that absolutely is the direction we should go. I totally agree with you.
Or perhaps lessen the rate of increase.
Yes,
Right.
or perhaps
Right.
lessen, to make it fair, always to make it fair, so that we're not looking at something to fund something because we think that'd be a good idea. We've got to have sound basis for the decisions we make, and I guess that's why I appreciate being able to rely on you so often for these things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The discussion that we're having largely mimics the discussion we've had internally. So we've had these very discussions, believe us.
I would support management's recommendation, 10.5 towards the pension, with the other going back to general funds, just as we've talked about, is what Joe's letter indicates. Maybe blunting increases for infrastructure replacement, because I appreciate where Mike's coming from, but if we can prevent something on 72nd Street from happening again because we are staying diligent on our infrastructure monitoring, you can't buy that kind of publicity back. We can't buy back what happened on 72nd Street. Even though it wasn't our fault, people are inconvenienced, it's a problem, it's a mess. Anything we can do to mute that, especially when we're looking at a 97% funded ratio. And I appreciate the OPEB discussion, but I couldn't support that, moving it to OPEB.
Well, Dave makes such a good point. 72nd is the main artery. I mean, we're not talking about some place that goes to a lesser-known area. We have an obligation, simple as that.
And I would say it's beyond just the rate effect. It's a quality of life issue. And we drive on these streets every day, and I've harped for years about road closures and what an inconvenience it is, and people drive angry as a result of it. So there's more than just some rates involved here. It's quality of life issues.
I just want to thank Mike for bringing this up. I agree with Dave that putting it back into the general fund, I think, is a better option for us. And as Mr. Doyle can attest to, the water infrastructure project has been a high priority for myself, and numerous discussions with Mr. Doyle and among the board. So I appreciate the board's discussion, and Mike, thanks for bringing that option up for OPEB.
And like I said, after hearing Mark and Joe, I'm on a fence post. I understand both sides of it, and hearing the board's comments, I'll agree, I'll defer to the recommendation of management.
So the final takeaway of significance, I think, from the valuation report is the funded ratio that Director McGowan referenced. We increased from 94% to 97%. So very, very healthy funding. I think the board's to be commended for the support in funding this ongoing, very important employee benefit. It's a promise we make to our employees, and I think your actions have confirmed that we take these promises seriously. So,
and Joe, I mentioned to Jim earlier, I said 97%. I said we got to be the envy of a lot of companies, municipalities, and utilities, and everybody. 97% is a great accomplishment.
Yes. The board's to be commended for the support. Thank you. And the other document that's very relevant to the pension plan, it's not in your board book, but it's the Gatsby report that provides the accounting guidance. And this relates more to the expense recognition side. What we just talked about, the evaluation, is the cash contribution. So there's the accrual accounting and then there's the cash accounting, excuse me. And you might have seen the memo and thought this has to be a typo. The numbers in brackets for pension expense. We actually had negative pension expense or pension income in 2021. And it's because of the way the guidance works. So anytime you have a return that varies from your assumed return, you create a layer, and that layer can be either good news or bad news. If you earn less, it's a negative layer, increases expense. If you earn more, it does just the opposite. So to put that into context, in 2021, we earned 13.7%. That created an excess earnings versus expectation of $34.6 million that's spread over 5 years. So there's not, in an attempt to get rid of the kind of the herky-jerky nature of doing it in 1 year, we do it over 5. It would just appear that perhaps more than 5 might be better guidance. The actuaries tend to do more smoothing than the accounting guidance suggests, but that's why you saw negatives, and that was not a typo. The last time we experienced a return below the assumption was in 2018, and that was a negative 5.3%. Now, on the flip side, that created a layer of $48.8 million of increased expense over 5 years. So that's why it's a pretty volatile number. The Gatsby guidance does provide yet another funded percent. So from a Gatsby perspective, we're at 109% funding. I will tell you the funding that the legislature receives, that is the Nebraska Retirement Systems Committee, per LB 759, is the actuarial valuation percentage, as well as other statistics, so we report that annually. So that's the extent of the comments on that. And then the final aspect of this is Ms. Beckham with Kavanaugh McDonald to take us through a summary of the Valuation Report. Pat will be joining us virtually, at least I hope, if technology works.
Good morning, this is Pat. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Joe?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can. Thank you. I appreciate that. You guys have had a really good discussion, and Joe always gives such a great summary that he makes my job easy, and we can move through this really quickly. There are 24 slides, and I'm not going to go through all of them. That's perhaps the good news for you today. We'll just look at about the first 13 and hit the high points. The rest is just for your information and knowledge. We've done this, every year for a long time. If you have questions as I go through, please feel free to stop me and we can answer the question right at that time. So if we could get, is the presentation up? I can't see it if it is, so. If we could go to slide 2. There we go. Just a reminder, when we talk about these benefit obligations, it's really true both for OPEB and for the pension plan. These are very, very long-term obligations. If we looked at the expected benefit payments for just current members, forget any new hires that might be coming in, those payments would stretch out over 75 years. So we have to keep sort of a long-term perspective, but obviously the funding of the plan is impacted by what happens in the short term as well. So it's sort of an interesting balance in the actuarial perspective of short and long term. Again, the whole purpose behind contributing money and creating a trust is we're trying to fund the plan's liabilities, and those liabilities are the expected benefit payments to be paid in the future. Our challenge is that those benefit payments are contingent on a number of future events. We don't know what will happen. We don't know what actual salary increases will be, when people will retire, how long they'll live, what cost of living adjustments will be. So we have to use all these assumptions to project those streams of future benefit payments. And even if over the long term, those assumptions are, quote, right or reasonable, they're going to vary from year to year because the short term actual experience often varies from the longer term trends. That variance creates uncertainty or risk. And then that risk translates into volatility in the funded ratio, and perhaps more importantly, in the actuarial contribution amount. We expect that, in particular on the investment return side. So that's why we do evaluation every year. We're trying to monitor the funding progress and adjust the contributions based on what's happened in the last year, so that we're not waiting too long and then there really has to be a big adjustment. So it's prudent to do these evaluations every year, and M.U.D has always, at least in the 25 years I've been working with you, you've always done an annual valuation. Could we have the next slide, please? Joe touched on this. Again, the key metric is really the actuarial contribution that is funded by both employees and the district. The employee contribution rate has been ramping up since the last bargaining agreement. It was 8% in 2021. We're at 8.5% in 2022. And the ultimate rate of 9% is reached next year in the 2023 valuation. No further increases after that. And then whatever is sort of left over is what the district contributes. Next slide, please. So this year we had an extra impact on the valuation that we don't see every year. By statute, the defined benefit plans in Nebraska are required to do an experience study every 4 years. So this was 2021, we did the full experience study, which is where we review all of the actuarial assumptions and methods and decide whether there need to be changes or not. So we went through that in 2021. The board took action. My memory's not very good, whether it was November or December. You adopted a new set of assumptions, and those are first reflected in this valuation, the January 1, 2022 valuation. And you can see kind of the laundry list there. The two big ones, the investment return assumption was lowered from 6.9 to 6.75, and the mortality assumption was updated to the most recent table, this Pub 2010, and that's the first time a mortality table has ever been based on data from public plans. So that's an important one, and we updated that. Those both increased liabilities and costs, but that what we're doing by changing those assumptions is kind of getting ahead of it, and rather than having losses that we have to kind of play catch up on, we're reflecting it now and starting to fund it now. Could I have the next slide, please?
Pat, let me ask you one quick question before we move on. That mortality assumption, does that put us in agreement with RSM, our auditor, and we don't have that argument anymore?
Yes, I think that's true. Kevin may want to speak to that, but we had no discussions with the auditor's actuaries this year about assumptions. So I believe we're on the same page.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So this gives you an idea of the impact of the experience study changes, all of them together. It increased the actuarial liability by $6 million. Obviously, doesn't change the assets, so that flows straight through to the unfunded actuarial liability. So on the old assumptions, the same ones that were in the 2021 valuation, we would have had an unfunded liability of about $10 million. Would have been 98% funded with a district contribution rate of 11.7 million, or about 8.1 million. The column next to that, the recommended assumptions which you adopted last year and are used in this valuation, we're actually at 16 million for the unfunded liability, just under 97% funded, and then the 8.6 million actuarial contribution rate that Joe mentioned in his presentation. So about the increase in the district's contribution was about $500,000. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we use many assumptions in the actuarial valuation. And so from year to year, when we're doing the valuation, we can measure what actually happened versus what the assumptions anticipated happening. And this is, you know, the main driver, again, of that volatility in the contribution rate. Now, investment return is kind of where it's at. That's the big one that drives whether it's good or bad. We've had 3 years of very strong returns, which has been kind of nice to be able to report good news to clients again. As Joe mentioned, the investment return for 2021 was just under 14% on a market value basis. We do use smoothing in the actuarial valuation to create more stability for both the funded ratio and, more importantly, the contribution, because the market tends to be up and down, and so we're trying to kind of average out the ups and downs and create more stability for budgeting purposes. But we still had an 11% return on the actuarial or smooth value of assets. So that, when you have favorable experience, it creates what we call an actuarial gain, simply better than what the assumption would have anticipated. Now, the assumption for 2021 was 6.9%. The change to 6.75 is looking forward 2022 and beyond. So that created an actuarial gain of $20 million. On the liability side, again, this is impacted a lot by what people do. We had more retirements than we expected, and that created an actuarial loss. Liabilities were higher than expected of about $2 million. Net actuarial gain was $18 million. So very favorable, and that's what you'll see when we compare the 2022 and the 2021 valuation. Because of that smoothing, the market value of assets is about $60 million higher than the actuarial value. We call that deferred or unrecognized investment gain. It's about 11%. So that provides kind of a nice cushion for adverse experience. The way the year has started out, that might be a good thing for 2022. We can kind of stress test it. We could absorb a minus 4% return on market value for calendar year 2022, and it would still meet the assumed rate of return on the actuarial value of assets. There would be no deferred gains at that point, but again, we smooth because when the markets tend to be very strong high, we often have a year that is a lot uglier, and then we've got this cushion to kind of absorb that. Next slide, please. So the column of numbers on the left is the current 1/1/22 valuation compared to the 1/1/21 valuation. The actuarial liability is sort of that, theoretically, how much money should be in the trust. We're funding the benefits over people's working career. So for every employee, you know, based on these assumptions and the expected payouts, we can calculate how much money should be in the trust if all those assumptions have been met for each person. That's the $534 million. That's why we're trying to get to 100% funding, because once we get there, the assets are where they should be, and all we have to pay for are future years of service for our active members. You can see actuarial assets went up more than the actuarial liability, and therefore the unfunded actuarial liability, which is just the difference of those two numbers, is down to $16 million. It was $30 million in last year's valuation. Again, the very strong investment return more than offset the impact of the assumption change. So the timing on that was fortuitous. Funded ratio is simply assets divided by liabilities. Again, for actuaries, we focus on the actuarial or the smooth value. Again, the 97% you were talking about earlier. On a market value, it is 108%. But again, we kind of don't count our chickens before they're hatched. So we hold that reserve to kind of counteract whatever might be coming down the road in 2022 or beyond. Next slide, please. So the contribution amount for the district is the key piece that comes out of the valuation, but there are a number of moving parts here that are worth mentioning quickly. The total contribution, which includes the cost for people who are actively working this year, plus a payment to move us, to 100% funding, that's a unfunded actuarial liability payment, is 20.86% of payroll. Again, the employees are paying 8.5% this year. That leaves the district's contribution rate of 12.36%. We apply that to the estimated covered payroll. This is Kavanaugh McDonald's estimate based on the number of people who were eligible for the retirement plan January 1 of 2022 and the expected salary increases based on our assumptions. So it may not match what you have for your budgeted 2022 payroll. This is sort of an actuarial version of it. And that's where we get the 8.6 million, again, down from 9.5 million last year, because you only fund benefits with contributions or investment income. And when we have a return like we had in 2021, where there are a lot more dollars of investment income being recognized, then the contributions go down. It works the other way when we have returns that are lower than expected. Next slide, please.
Pat, can you hear me? Mark Doyle.
Yes.
I don't want to be rude, but we've gone through a lot of these things, and that last slide especially reminds me, and we still have to get through the audited financials. My apologies, but how much time do you have left? I want you to get to the most important things, because we just had a pretty long pension discussion prior to this.
I understand. When I started, I was going to tell you we could probably skip to the very end, because
You should have. Sorry. That's my fault. I should have managed this better.
That's okay. And I wasn't sure how that interacted, but I maybe would just go to slide 11. Jay, will be there for it. And this just reinforces what y'all were talking about before. The red line is your actual contributions, and the blue lines are the actuarial. And again, I just want to commend you on the discipline of funding essentially more than the actuarial rate. And that's why you're 97% funded. And you should feel really good about that. And I have to mention it. So moving on to the next slide. So that's the good news. This is my warning. So this is just looking at how different investment returns impact contributions over time. And the point is, we're just varying returns for 2022, 2023, 2024. And there's nothing magical about these three scenarios other than to illustrate the range, how investment return drives contributions. And we don't know how that will unfold. So it's just kind of a reality check. And we look at this every year, and it's just to really help illustrate over the long run, the investment return really drives the boat on contributions. So just a heads up. And I think really the next slide, we've already talked about that. I just want to, again, commend you. The assumption changes were a really good way to strengthen the plan's funding. Your funding policy has been amazing. I'm so proud to be associated with you guys and being able to work with you a very long time. And keep up the good work. Thank you for your time. And I'm sorry, I should have shortened that.
That's okay, Pat. No apologies needed. No problem. Thank you for the presentation. Very much appreciated. And yeah, we appreciate the work you're doing as well.
Thank you.
So you feel like you're ready to tell us about the audit now, Joe? It was a really good audit, I know that.
So good morning again. Behind tab 14, I'm Joe Schaffert, Chief Financial Officer. So behind tab 14 is the audited financial statements for 2021. Despite the fact that it's bound in a nice RSM document, I think it's important that Director Cook is holding up nicely. I think it's important to comment that these financial statements are our responsibility. They're prepared by us. In fact, Mark Myers and his team prepared pages 4 through 81. So a tremendous amount of work goes into this. But the punchline is the district received an unmodified or clean audit opinion, which means the financial statements fairly present the financial position of the district pursuant to all the accounting guidance that guides us. And again, in the interest of brevity, that's the punchline. Kevin Smith, the assurance partner from RSM, will make some brief comments on the audit. So if Kevin's available.
Yes, good morning. Joe, thanks for the summary. Overall, as Joe mentioned, it was a clean audit. The opinion from RSM was an unmodified or a clean opinion, so that is the highest level of assurance that you can receive as a part of the audit. We also do look at internal controls as they relate to financial reporting of the district, and pleased to report there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies over any of that work. So again, clean from an internal control perspective. The other thing I'll mention is that we did not have to make any significant adjustments to the financial statements. There were actually no adjustments made to the financial statements, no disagreements with management, no difficulties performing the audit. We always have full cooperation from all the departments we work with, have access to all of the information that we need to perform our audit. And with that, I'll leave my comments very brief, but happy to answer any questions. Just to mention as well, we did meet with the audit committee a few weeks ago to go through the results in detail. But happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Can I just say one thing? As head of the audit committee, I went through the audit reports with the committee and everything. I just want to thank Joe, Mark Myers, and the entire team for their hard work in keeping strong and accurate books. That doesn't just happen by chance. There were no adjustments. We got a clean audit, and that's a reflection on the hard work of you guys. I just want to thank you guys for it because it's a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Accounts, expenditures, finance, and rates. Mark Myers.
Good morning, Mark Myers, Vice President of Accounting. Thank you for those comments. I would like to give a lot of credit to my staff day in and day out. They're doing their work diligently to close the books and analyze the numbers, and that's not taken for granted. Thank you. I just want to provide a brief summary or highlights of the 2021 financial year. A lot of that was covered through the pension and audit discussion, but I'll just cover briefly in a few pages some of the highlights. This document is in the back of your binders. It's called the 2021 Financial Review. So with that, just look at a summary of the combined, let's see here. Jay, I'll let you flip the pages if you don't mind. Just go to page 2, please. So this is a consolidated look at revenue, operating expense, and net income for the year combined for gas and water. And although the COVID pandemic continued into 2021, we did perform very well, both compared to budget and to prior year. On the bottom right-hand chart, you can see that net income in total for gas and water was $93.3 million, significantly higher than budget and also higher than 2020. The water department had a good year with a net operating revenue of $142.5 million. You can see that in the upper left chart in the teal colored numbers. That's about 1.8% higher than budget. Largely due to higher usage by our customers. The volumes are shown in the top right. Those were about 3.5% higher than budget for 2021. Operating expense and other is in the lower left. That totaled $95.8 million for the water department. That was $22.9 million lower than budget. And the biggest driver there was the adjustments, the year-end adjustments for pension and OPEB expense, as Joe described. With the strong investment returns, we actually ended up with pension income for the year rather than expense, lowering that. Again, Joe described how that's calculated, and that contributed significantly to the favorable variance. Another thing that stood out in the variance is we did plan for issuing bonds in 2021. That was deferred until 2022 to align better with the timing of when we spend the money for the projects. So we had planned for about $1.6 million of interest and issuance costs in 2021 that didn't occur. So between the pension and OPEB and these bond issuance costs, that explains the vast majority of the variance on the expenses. That results in net income for the Water Department of $46.7 million, which was $25.4 million higher than budget and $1.6 million better than in 2020. The gas department also performed well. Net revenue was $107.2 million. That's after deducting the cost of gas. That was $5.8 million higher than budget, partially due to increased volumes, which were up slightly, and also due to other non-volume related revenue and customer growth. Operating expenses here were $60.6 million. That was $23 million below budget. Again, pension and OPEB, the primary driver there, $22.3 million combined impact on the gas side. And here too, we did plan to issue bonds. Issuance costs and interest expense were budgeted at $2.5 million. That was delayed, and those bonds were just recently issued a couple of weeks ago here. So that's been completed now in 2022. Net income for the gas department, very similar to the water, $46.6 million. That was $28.8 million better than budget and $5.8 million higher than 2022. If we could go to the next slide, Jay. I just want to show some information about our cash balances. That's another good indicator of our financial strength or health. You can see on the gas side, this is the last 5 quarters. We ended the year with $127.3 million of unrestricted cash. That's about 232 days cash on hand. That's down about $23.9 million from a year ago, and there are a number of factors driving that. One of those is we did spend about $8 million for the LNG project on the renovations that would be funded through bonds. Those bonds issued just a couple of weeks ago. We did reimburse the operating cash for those amounts that were spent. So it's just kind of a timing issue there, spending it in advance of issuing the bonds. We also replenished our inventories of LNG and propane that were depleted earlier in the year, used for peak shaving purposes. The higher cost of gas contributed to that, and that increased inventory by about $7.2 million, basically increasing balance sheet amounts that will be recovered over time as those resources are needed for peak shaving in the future. And then just in general, higher cost of natural gas that we purchased near the end of the year and billed to our customers, that increased our accounts receivable, lowering our cash, but will be collected over time as the customers pay their bills here early in the year. So that's explaining the change in the cash there. On the water side, you can see some improvement. We ended the year with $98.8 million compared to $83.3 at the end of the prior year. That represents 389 days cash on hand. I would like to remind everyone that that is definitely a good sign and good improvement. A lot of that $98 million is essentially encumbered for specific purposes. So about, for example, $37 million of that has been collected for future water infrastructure replacement projects. There's another $27 million that's been collected in advance from developers for future construction projects. $17 million for sewer fees that we've collected for the cities that haven't been dispersed yet, customer deposits and other things, leaving about $10 million of that $98 million that's available for operations.
So unrestricted does not mean unencumbered, is that correct?
Right. It's our our only restricted funds would be things that are reserved for bond requirements or sinking funds of those natures, or bond proceeds that we haven't spent yet. This would be other operating things that we've identified a use for by collecting fees and that type of thing, but we just categorize those as unrestricted.
And that's what you report to the bond agencies, the unrestricted here, even though they are encumbered, like you said, we report to the bond agencies the unrestricted. That's what they ask for.
Correct. They evaluate based on this unrestricted cash, and the days cash on hand are calculated using that number, which is, and they're aware of the details of those things, yeah. Okay, so that explains the cash balances. The final page I have, if you could change, please. Just a few of the key financial measures that we use to monitor the health of the district's financial stability. The debt service coverage here, that's a very important metric required by the bonds that we've issued in those agreements. We're required to keep 1.2 times or generate coverage of 1.2 times the debt service requirement. You can see here that the water and gas are both well above that metric, so that's a good thing. Joe and Pat talked about the pension funding ratio, so that's also good news. Here on the OPEB funding, we did talk about that earlier. So the district contributed a total of $13.3 million in 2021. $9.7 million was to fund the trust for future benefits to be paid out of that as we decide to do that in the future. And 3.6 was the pay-as-you-go out of our operating funds to pay for retiree medical claims and fees and that type of thing. Also shown here are the credit ratings from the three major rating agencies, also kind of affirming our financial strength. Fitch and Moody's most recently here in February affirmed their ratings for the district when we issued the gas revenue bonds. And on the water department, the most recent ratings were from Moody's in August of 2021, which was affirmed at AA2, and they did, S&P did upgrade their rating for our water business to AA in July of 2021. So overall, I think a good year. We did well in 2021 and put ourselves in a good position going into 2022. Any questions about that information? Thank you.
Do any board members have further comments? Are there any members of the public attending the meeting in the adjacent conference room who would like to address the board? Committee meetings have now concluded. We will reconvene for the regular monthly board meeting in 10 minutes at 9:56.
Yeah.
Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you all to the regular monthly board meeting this morning, April 6th, 2022. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at the M.U.D headquarters building located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the M.U.D website after the meeting's conclusion. Members of the public who may be attending today's proceedings may do so from an adjacent conference room. If any member of the public wishes to address the board, they will be escorted to the boardroom by the conference room moderator. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard? Here. Kavanaugh?
Here.
Bagley?
Here.
Cook?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Frost?
Here. I would like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall in the back of the boardroom, and a copy is also available in the nearby conference room set aside for members of the public who may attend. As was announced at last month's meeting, the M.U.D board must comply with a statutory requirement under the Open Meetings Act, which limits the number of virtual board meetings to half the total number of board meetings during the course of the calendar year. This announcement is solely intended to ensure that this board remains mindful of the statutory limitation. At this time, there are 4 possible virtual meetings remaining for the current year. As mentioned at the February and March board meetings, once the statutory limitation has been met and we've reached the maximum allowable virtual meetings for the year, a board member may still opt to attend a board meeting virtually, but will not be recorded as present in the meeting minutes, and will not be available to participate in meeting discussions, and will not be able to vote on any meeting agenda items. And now for those who wish to participate, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes for the committee meetings and regular board meetings for March 2nd.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Approval of meetings for the emergency board meeting for March 7th, 2022. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from March 7th, 2022.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Capital Expenditures, Director Friend.
Thank you. Item number 6, capital expenditures discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Gina Langle dated March 30th.
I second.
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates, Director Friend.
Thank you. Item number 7, also discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Stephanie Henn dated March 30th.
And I will say second.
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Bids on materials and contracts, Director Friend.
Thank you. Item number 8, also discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Sherry Meisinger dated March 25th.
Second.
Roll call, or discussion. Now roll call.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Adopt design, build, and construction management at risk process contract delivery system options for district construction projects. Director Friend.
Thank you. Item number 9, also discussed in committee. I move approval. Actually, I think we need to adopt a resolution. Motion that we adopt a resolution as attached to tab number 9.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Mean extensions. Director Friend again.
Thank you. Also discussed in committee, this is item number 10, main extensions. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Corey O'Brien dated March 28th.
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Wage and/or salary increases and ratifications. Director Begley.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve the wage and/or salary increases and ratifications as outlined in the memo from Ms. Savine on March 24th, 2022, and discussed in committee this morning.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Third legislative report for 2022. Director Cook.
Thank you. Item number 12, the third legislative report for 2022. I move we approve the third legislative report for 2022 dated March 28th, 2022, and as presented in the committee meetings by Mr. Kubat.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. Actuarial Valuation Report on the Retirement Plan. Director Howard.
Thank you. I would like to request the actuarial report and the Gatsby 67 and 68 report be placed on file. I would also like to make motion to approve the contribution rate of 10.5% to the pension plan consistent with management's recommendation as presented by Mr. Shafford in the committee meetings.
Tanya requested that we hold it over, is that correct?
Well,
For discussion.
yeah, I didn't request formally.
Are you
There was another-
formally asking now or not?
No, I am not.
Okay.
But thank you for.
Second.
No, I am not. Thank you for clarifying
Okay.
that.
Second. Discussion.
I think that turn left the station.
Roll call.
Discussion. It should be 10.5 million for the record, not 10.5%. So colleague Gwen would.
Thank you, colleague friend, for giving me that correction. Not percentage, million.
Is the gentleman happy with the clarification?
Big difference between 10.5% and 10.5 million.
Okay, I'll second
So
it.
Joe, you're okay with that?
Yeah. 10.5 million, I'm fine. Good catch, gentleman friend. Nice catch.
Okay, do I have a and a second, don't I? And we have the
Do we have a
discussion. Roll call.
Yeah.
Tim Kavanaugh, second.
You're the second?
Yep.
Okay,
You're
discussion.
throwing them off their game now.
Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. 2021 audited financial statement. Director McGowan.
RSM, M.U.D's external auditor, issued an unmodified and a clean audit report opinion. I request the report be placed on file.
Second?
Second?
No, don't need,
Wait.
don't need a vote.
I
Okay.
don't need one for that, do I?
Good.
Okay, good. Okay. I don't need a roll call either, then,
Right.
do I? Okay. Other matters of district business for discussion. The Director of Marketing and Builder Services, Jason Stanek, will be providing a brief update regarding recent discussions with Platzman.
Good morning, Jason Stanek, Director of Business Development. I wanted to provide the board with a brief update on our involvement with Platzman. We're currently working on a memorandum of understanding with Plattsmouth for a future wholesale water service connection. And just to provide the board with some background on this, we've had discussions with Plattsmouth for going back over a decade on a potential water service connection. And those discussions were really elevated after the 2019 flood event, which impacted their current water treatment facility. So in August of last year, we did receive a formal request for water service from Mayor Lambert with Plattsmouth. And since that time, we've been having some high-level discussions with the city administrator and their design engineer on what that project will look like moving forward. So think of this MOU as basically a next step in the process for that as they start working through design with their consulting engineer. Our plan is to get that MOU finalized. Mr. Mendenhall and I are working on that right now, and that will be approved at the Plattsmouth Council meeting on April 18th. So I'd be happy to take any questions you guys might have. No? Excellent, thank you. We'll keep the board updated. Obviously, there would be a wholesale water service agreement we would enter into with them eventually, but that's probably, 18 months down the road. So this will be quite a project.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Comments you would like to share? Do we have a motion?
I have one comment. I'd just like to say it's nice being back to almost normal. No screens here, and I truly appreciate the presenters not wearing a mask. I can hear you better and understand you, and I think our audience can. So I think that's very great. And if in the future meetings, if we have somebody come from the public, can they come in and listen to the board meeting in person here rather than sit out in the other room?
Director McGowan, Mark Doyle, President, yes, they will be able to come in here and listen.
Okay.
Yeah, we're correct? Okay. And then the only other thing I'd mention is the plan is to do the State of the District next meeting, and I don't expect to take more than 4 or 5 hours. But I'll get started at 4 a.m. and you can join me.
Are we voting on your compensation package right after that? Okay.
It's going to be a really short State of the District, yes. Yeah.
Any more comments?
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes. We are adjourned.